Good day, everyone. In collaboration with the Alcoholic Rehabilitation Services of Hawaii, better known as Hinamalka, and Recovery Real Talk, my name is Bill Mauser, and I am your host today on this podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today I have two special guests joining us on this podcast. The CEO of Hinamalka, Brian Baker, and the CEO, owner, and founder of the Moi Group, Kahal Quinn. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. First of all, what I wanted to do is ask is how did you guys both meet? What transpired as a result of that meeting? And what did you both of your agencies have in common?
So, if I could jump in
Yeah,
first
please,
here.
sir.
So, excuse me. We received a call that there was this guy that just walked into one of our units down in Waipahu, Hawaii, and said he wanted to make us the beneficiary of a golf tournament, a charity golf tournament. And so, as you can imagine, that was something that we don't hear every day. Somebody coming in from a foreign country and wanting to give you some money to help support your nonprofit organization. But I did my research. I started by talking to him, and then I talked to some folks that he had been involved with, and the golf tournament, just to try to make sure that this was a legitimate opportunity. And what I found was that it really was. It was this gentleman that runs a massive multinational corporation that is a philanthropist and is constantly giving back to nonprofit organizations, and just a really, really great opportunity. So I went up to North Shore and I met with Kahal, and I talked story with him for quite some time. And what I learned was that Kahal's the real deal. He was somebody that wanted to give back in a way that not all of us are always willing to do. And he was willing to be vulnerable and tell his story about how he got to where he is. So I was just thrilled with the opportunity, and that's really where we kind of started.
Great. Hey, Kahal, would you like to elaborate a little bit more about what the Moi Group does and your journey along that way?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, just to elaborate on Brian, when we were having the golf tournament, and I've started these about 4 or 5 years ago in France, and then usually I have them around a conference that I attend in different locations. So every January I come to this wonderful island. I have them for the last 4 or 5 years, and I reached out to a couple of charities, and usually I will, and I'll talk about in a moment why, but usually I will support charities that are around mental wellness, addiction, suicide, etc. Because it's heavily correlated with my own life. And so when I did some research and I found this particular charity, I was like, this non-profit, I was like, yeah, it really fit in my mind. So I did. I mean, I tried to ring and I couldn't get through for obvious reasons, because I'm sure, there's a lot of people ringing for the wrong reasons and different things like that. So I said, I'm going to doorstep them. So I doorstepped, and I called into the most local centre I could find, and I just felt like there was a huge connection. So there's two connections. There's my personal story, which is obviously one which I talked about today here in the centre, which is one of trauma, one of conflict, and one of choices. And initially, I didn't realise I had choice until I met a centre like this 18 years ago, and services like this, and recovery rooms. But also since even that meeting, I've had a series of opportunities and choices, and some of them I have made good choices, and some of them not so. And the opportunity to be able to give something back to an organisation like this, but also for me, whenever the industry that I'm in, we're very fortunate, right? I've mentioned a couple of times today, first world problems, right? And we're very fortunate. We're in a fast-paced technology space in the construction side of it, and fast-paced technology space, but there is money, and most of us who work within that sector are very appreciative of what we have, and a lot of us will talk about and know that we're very lucky. So to be able to give something back to a community that we have the joys of coming and seeing the finer parts of your island every January, right? And we get to hang out in Waikiki. And I'm not saying Waikiki's the finest part, but there's multiple finest parts. And to some people it is. It depends on what you want out of life, right? But you fancy hotels and big dinners and steak dinners and all this kind of stuff, and people can go for glasses of wine and chat and get brought out in boats and stuff, and but I know that around every corner, of every street, there's a different story that we're not seeing. And to be able to have an impact in that here locally in somewhere that we come and we get to enjoy the finer things, to be able to give something back was hugely important. And the other side of the why in general is, look, yes, we're there's first world problems, but one of the first world problems within our sector, and it's rife across the whole world, and there is no boundary on economy when it comes to mental wellness issues and mental health issues. And one, three that are very prevalent in ours is, stress and mental health issues in general, and affiliated with burnout, affiliated with substance use and misuse and addiction in general, and also unfortunately suicide and termination of one's life. And I shared earlier at the lunch we had here with some of the staff that I know personally I've come across 7 different people over my time in this industry who have, either I know them or I know someone who knows them, who have taken their own life, and the career was one of the contributing factors. Obviously not the only contributing factor, but one of them. And yeah, so that's the why, if that makes sense.
I think part of it too, as you were sharing earlier, that this, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Addiction affects everyone.
Yeah.
If you play the game, you're eligible.
Yeah.
You're eligible to get injured. And that's kind of been the case. And will you kind of talk about, or any one of you talk about a little bit about the importance of treatment when someone is has been affected by addiction? How important is treatment in that process to at least get somebody on track on the road to recovery? You guys, any one of you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
You start, yeah.
So it's vitally important. Treatment is not the end-all be-all, but it's a good first step. When we have somebody that comes into our treatment program here, they've had a lot of struggles, they've made a lot of poor choices, they have done things that they wouldn't normally have done had they not been living within their addiction. But you got to break that cycle at some point, and that's really what treatment is. It's a start so that you can get away from that for a little bit. And some people are capable of getting past an addiction by themselves or with the help of other people, but not maybe in a treatment program. It does happen, but it makes it so much easier if you can be around people that are struggling with the same things, that breaks your cycle, that takes you out of that environment for a little bit and gives you an opportunity to slow down, gives you an opportunity to clear your head, and gives you the support that you need through counseling, through peer-led activities. Just gives you a break. That is vitally important for so many of us to be able to then move on. And so for me, that's what treatment is about, is breaking the cycle and giving somebody an opportunity, a head start on their road to recovery.
Great. So with that said, Brian, treatment can be a good place to start, but it's not the end of the actual journey. So could you talk about, a little bit about how important support for someone's early recovery or even ongoing recovery is?
Yeah, I suppose I can come at it from a perspective of my own experience of recovery, and also having studied some stuff around addiction counseling as well. I think to go back a little step, what I'm hearing when Brian's talking is, I love an analogy and I love likening things, connecting things together. And if we think of, jobs and business and stuff, a lot of people do well because they went to university first, right? And it's the first step, right? So I'd almost look at centres like this as kind of recovery universities, right? Because you get a very intensive period at the start.
Interesting concept.
It's, you're going to be around other people that are at a similar stage to you, so they're not, they're not well educated in it yet either, right? And they might be their second or third try, but they're back in and they're out, and it exposes you. And bear in mind, when we're in active addiction, and I've been there, right? We're in a very intensive environment. So if you're trying to do that by yourself, and whether it's white knuckling, whether it's just using the meeting rooms, it may not be, it is enough for some people, but it may not be enough. The sheer willpower alone might not be enough. So to go from one intense environment to another intense environment, one that has of support and of care, and like when we're out in the intensive environment, out in the streets, I spoke and I speak about being a gambling addict first and foremost, right? That was my first kind of addiction with a label on it, right? There was other issues that I had, but when I felt extremely welcome the first time I walked into a casino. Of course I did.
Yep.
Right? I was a cash cow. I was a cash cow to the other punters. I was a cash cow to the house. The house always wins. So you've come from that intensity, but this time you're coming to an intensity that genuinely only wants the best for you. And what Brian has said is so important, and you said as well, but it's the start. So the same as you don't go into university, study for 3 or 4 years. I didn't, by the way. I skipped that step. I went to university in life. It took me 20 years or more, or 40, and I studied afterwards. But if you go to university, you don't walk into a company and become a CEO, right? So the same way you don't walk into a treatment centre and suddenly, hey, magic, I'm recovered. Because you're never recovered. You're always in recovery, right? As we know, and we talked about this ourselves. But and the same as being a CEO, right? You can lose your job tomorrow with a bad choice or a bad decision, right? And it's the same in the roots in recovery. You by bad choices you can make, but the more tools you get exposed to, and the more of business is all about networks, and so is this, right? You're exposed to a centre. You then have aftercare programs. You then have other people that have come in and out of the program that you meet in the rooms. You can relate with them, you've spent your life relating with people in negative behaviour, likely if you're in that cycle, and now you have a very different opportunity. And so that intensive 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 weeks, whatever it might end up being, it's golden. It's if you're ready to grasp it. And no different to walking. Like you go from a rich family, and your parents go, "Yeah, I'm going to send you to university," and you can do first year 5 times and never do anything with it. No different than people come into treatment 5 or 6 times. But it doesn't mean the university go, we're going to close our doors, we're not letting anybody in anymore because, a lot of people drop out. No, we keep the doors open because a lot of people do get it. And I think that's of such high importance,
Absolutely. And the ability of us to provide an environment that's always there, that's always willing to accept you, even if it's your 5th time or your 6th time, doesn't matter. We're going to keep the doors open, to your point, Colin. And we're going to let you try again.
Yeah.
That is so vitally important for people to know. It doesn't matter who's walking through the door. You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that's our job, is to ensure that the opportunity exists and stay away from dictating who gets it. You know what I mean? It's been, I think, Hinamalka's philosophy all these years, that door needs to stay open. You never know when someone gets it, right? They get it, come in for the first time, they get it, that's great, but sometimes, and most times, people don't get it the first time. And the importance of support, as you were speaking to, of course, people can do it on their own, and maybe their condition wasn't as severe as others. That also plays an important factor. But it just makes it easier when you got support and you got good connection. You got, there's that old saying, right? The ones that stray away from the herd tend to get eaten. You know what I mean? So if I hang with the herd, I have a better chance of surviving. And that's kind of so important. I've been exposed to a lot on social media about people pursuing sobriety or recovery, and a lot of people are still struggling because they take what they've known all their life to solve problems and apply it to this problem and find that it sometimes not applicable, and they struggle with that, and they don't realize that having support can definitely make a big impact in terms of get going, kind of get your recovery going.
Yeah, it's all about your toolbox.
Right.
How many tools, what tools are in your toolbox? And if you've got family, if you've got resources, if you've got, if you know about yourself, you know yourself intimately, maybe you can do it yourself. That's great. You've got the tools in your toolbox to be successful. Not everyone has that. And so treatment is where you first come to open up your tool bag and start collecting those tools that are going to get you through and sticking them in your tool bag. That's what treatment, to me, that's what treatment is
That's
about.
a good point. That's a good point.
You never stop collecting either, right? Do you? You know, you look at I had this vision of a video game, you're going around with like Super Mario Brothers and you're getting your tool bag and you're filling them up with tools and the first time we experience something is the first time we experience something. So we're not going to have a tool. So that even in recovery, you're going to have opportunities and things that come across you that you haven't had to deal with before, whether it's the death of a loved one, maybe a friend who's in recovery who's slipped or relapsed and they've now passed away. It could be the breakup of a marriage or a relationship, and you need to dig deep sometimes in that toolbox and that tool bag, to really deal with those things. And to a point that you said a minute ago, Bill, for me, and we were talking about this earlier as well, people, of course there are people that can manage to do it themselves, and sometimes you're right, sometimes it is that maybe they weren't deep enough. Sometimes as well it might be just what you're surrounded by. So if you're surrounded by chaos and you're trying to recover and you're really trying to really invest it, it's, as you said, you're straight away from the herd and you're back into the other herd. It's very difficult, and it doesn't always suit everybody. Just because we see recovery as a positive thing, and it is a positive thing, by the way, it's a phenomenal thing, but other people in our lives might not always see it. It mightn't suit them. They mightn't say that, but it mightn't suit them, right? For a relationship, whether it's codependency, whether it's maybe there's, for example, if we're in drugs, maybe there was a lifestyle that came out of it, maybe the addict was also making money out of it, and the family were getting money out of it, whatever it might be, criminal activity, etc. So it doesn't always suit everybody. So just because you think people are behind you, and they might not be. So when you come somewhere like this, there's unconditional support. And as you said, it doesn't matter first time, fifth time, who cares, right? It's an opportunity to save lives.
Right.
And an opportunity to allow a person to save their own life, which is even more valuable, right? You know what I mean? And all this can do is give them the tools. We talked about, Miller and Rollin, they can motivation interview and hold up the mirrors for people. But they have to do the work.
For someone who's listening to our podcast, who's afraid to reach out for help, what would you say to them?
From the treatment perspective, I would say, I don't care who you are, what you've done, I want you to be successful. And if you can be successful here, then I'm going to welcome you in and give you a shot. If you're successful without us, that's awesome. Good for you. But if you need us, we are here. That's the whole thing. If you need us, we are here, and we're going to be here. We fight for people so that we can keep the doors open, so that we can be here when you need us. So don't hesitate to reach out. It takes a lot of courage. It takes vulnerability, but it will be worth it. So please reach out and connect.
I think, an experience I had when I went for my first assessment in a treatment centre 18 and a half years ago, what was said to me was, look, maybe you don't need this. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, because they weren't making the decision for me, but they're like, you've tried every other way, and you've tried so far, and you've tried every other path, and they haven't worked. So how much damage are you really going to know by trying this, right? So if you try it, that old phrase in life, right? Take what you leave and take what you need and leave the rest. So if you walk in and you don't, then fine. But but why not give? You've nothing to lose by giving it a try, and you possibly have a lot to gain. You know, and when I say possibly, I believe you have loads to gain if you're willing to do the work. But it's the time isn't always right for everybody. You know, the circumstances. But there's a huge opportunity to gain something. And if you look at, you know, if you think about it in business terms again, right? You know, someone says, right, you invest 5-6 weeks of your time learning something, and there's a huge chance that your outcomes are going to be 10, 20, 100-fold better than they have been in business. And the worst thing that'll happen is you didn't learn anything new, but you gave up 5 weeks of your time. Show me a businessman or woman that won't take that. Absolutely, they'll take that, right? You know what I mean? Of course they will. Because, you know, excuse the pun coming from a gambler in recovery, but, you know, not bad odds, like, you know. I don't have to give anything away, bar a little bit of time. And I mean, if you think about it logically, depending on how many years you've been in active addiction, how much of your time have you already given away, right, for free, and paid to give it away. So now, and paid an emotional price as well as a financial price, right? So I think that's, to me, that's an important piece, you know.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter where you're at that point in time. I mean, at the worst that could happen from not taking an opportunity, you're going to be exactly who you are right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. This work we do, right? You, Brian, you're the CEO of Hinamalka. You provide treatment and opportunity, as we spoke, for those who need this opportunity. What does that mean when you extended yourself to be available as an organization in human services, providing mental health services? What does it mean to you when you recognize someone that has come through your program or someone you have helped personally? What does that mean to you, the impact of that to you as a person?
So, as you know, Bill, I've been in this arena in behavioral health for over 30 years. I've had many different roles, doing different things in healthcare, doing different things in behavioral healthcare over that 3-decade career. When I came to Hinamalka, I started being able to say, when somebody would ask, what do you do? I was like, well, I work at a substance abuse program. Oh, really? What is it? Hinamalka. I went through Hinamalka. I graduated from there. I've been sober for 16 years because of the work that Hinamalka did. Or my auntie or my uncle or my cousin came through Hinamalka, and they should have been dead today, and they are not. They are alive. There is nothing that I'm getting choked up now. There's nothing that chokes me up more than knowing that I'm trying to contribute in my little bitty way to an organization that literally saves lives, and those lives go out and they touch so many other lives. That is what it's about, Bill. There are many other ways to make a whole lot more money in this world than working for a nonprofit organization. And I don't say that disparagingly, but the feeling that you get from knowing that you're supporting an organization that has changed somebody's life in a positive trajectory. There is nothing, from a selfish standpoint, absolutely selfish, I acknowledge that. From a selfish standpoint, there is nothing that feels better.
Thank you. What about you, Paul? Given the work that you and your organization does, geez, what you've done for Hinamalka, what does that mean to you? How does that make you feel from a personal?
Yeah, I think from a personal perspective, I mean, look, I said it earlier when we were having a conversation, and I said it in the talk, to be in recovery myself, to work every day just for today, for that recovery, to have the privilege to own and run a business that, I was fired from, and you know, and then bought many years later, right? It's laughable, right? It is in any walk of life. It's
Not at the
laughable.
moment, but now it's.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't laughable at the moment, but I remember the moment that I was fired like it was yesterday, right? And that's good. I'm glad I remember it, right? I need to remember it, you know, because we're only a decision away from catastrophe, you know, and self-inflicted catastrophe. So for me, to be able to then have had people that have impacted you and programs that have impacted you, and then to be able to give back in that sort of way and have the opportunity that the platform that I've created for myself, and like, look, yeah, I raised some money for Hinamaca, but I didn't do it on my own. My industry did it, but I utilised my network. I've worked very hard over the last 20 years on a network, a career, and you know, some of them weirdly in active addiction. I mean, I'd often say that, you know, where I got to in certain ways, the price that I paid is addiction for the role that I have. So if that's part of the price that I've paid, then why don't I look to see if I can cash in on that a little bit to give something back to help others maybe not have to pay the same price as I paid. Now, just to say something, you talked about, you know, being selfish. When I say the price I paid, no one maybe paid that price, only me. My choices got me here. Right, and my choices got me to where I am today, but they got me to a place that I needed recovery. So it's very hard to put in words the fulfillment that you get by being able to, you know, I mean, if someone told me when I was in high school, 13, 14, 15 years of age, number one, you're going to get a chance in your life to go to Hawaii once, never mind 6, 7, 8 times, that you're going to have a tough life, and you're going to go through some challenges, but because of it, you're then going to get an opportunity to, in 2 different continents, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, by the time I'm finished, who knows, right? You know, you're going to get an opportunity to give so much back, and contribute some funds that will allow other people to give people an opportunity to save their own life. I mean, unless you're designing medical equipment or cancer cures, there's very few other people that get an opportunity to have that impact. And yeah, again, selfishly, damn, that's fulfilling, you know? And to hear people say things like, you know, when I went to a treatment centre in Ireland 18 years ago called the Rutland Centre, and I know some of the therapists, I knew them then, and you can see, you know, you can see the fulfillment, you know? Yeah, they don't have the 6, 7 figures that other people might do with the same acumen and the same education, but they're deciding to use it in a different way. And believe me, you know, all that money, you know, if you have peace, we were talking about this earlier, if you have peace, money and careers definitely help, right? Because they do, you know, you can get a safer roof over your head and a safer environment, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have peace in your mind, all the money in the world is absolutely no use to you, in my opinion, you know? I mean, it might build a better facade, but that's all it is.
Good point. Yeah, for me, I think I mean, I don't even look at my job as a job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get an opportunity to come and offer something that is actually priceless, something I built unintentionally almost. You know, my liabilities are now my greatest assets. You know, and I get to use those assets to help others. You know, and when you meet them, like you were saying, Brian, when you meet them on the road, and you know, sometimes I can't even recognize who the person is. I can't remember their name, so we use other terms. Hey, bro, you know what I mean? I can't remember, but he remembers you from Hinamaca or from someplace in recovery. It's like, it's a priceless reward. You know, it's nothing like it. You know, I think you were about to say that too. There's nothing like it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Anything else we need to talk about that you want the viewers to know about what you do, Paul, Brian, what Hinamaca does? Anything else you guys want the viewers to know?
So I think I'd be interested to hear from Cahal. So you've been incredibly vulnerable and open with your experiences in your childhood, with your challenges with mental health, with your challenges with multiple addictions. And one of the things that I noticed when I came up to meet you the first time was you were supporting your staff in a way that I have never seen a CEO support their staff before. It was just amazing. The attention and resources that you placed on making sure that your folks, number one, know they're appreciated. Number two, have an opportunity to take a break and to figure out how do I rejuvenate. You support them emotionally. You support them, I guess, emotionally is what struck me. Why do you see that as such an important part, and how do you make sure that you make that part of your actual business model?
Yeah. Well, look, obviously I have my own personal reasons, obviously, right? And I've struggled and I've made mistakes and I've had opportunities. But if we even strip that back and we just looked at it with a commercial lens, right? Let's, do what businesses have to do, right? We are nothing without our people. And people, we're flawed. Human beings are flawed, right? We don't come out of a factory, shiny. We do, but we're going to change, we're going to evolve. Whereas a car comes out of a factory, and if you look after it and you have a lovely car, 100 years later, if you don't put much mileage on it, you take care of it, it'll look the exact same. The baby that comes out of the womb isn't going to look the same, and emotionally it's not going to be the same. So, how in business these people have their own piece and the flaws that they have, and then some that we collect along the way. So not, we're innocent when born, until the rest of us get hold of that young poor baby and then make them uninnocent, right? Society does it, right? Society, the person's part they play in society. So our part to play is obviously to make sure that we support our people, because they are human beings and they're human first. And I do say it all the time in our business, we are all human first. I know people would challenge me over the years, and I've talked about it openly as well. There's times that I definitely buried myself in work and I let it define me because it suited me. There's times it definitely was my primary addiction, some would argue that maybe, some days it might be. But for me, for people to be able to, they come here for 40 hours or whatever hours a week they're contracted, we definitely shouldn't be impacting that more, their mental well-being in a negative way, but also if we can give back in a positive way, then look, they will benefit, and therefore, the organisation, and if not the organisation, the industry, because they'll move to another company and that will benefit, I think. So I think that's a really key part. And then there's just the piece of, look, when you have the privilege, and I say it's a privilege, to own a business. It doesn't always feel like a privilege some days to run a business, but it's a privilege to own a business. There are days it's a great privilege to run a business, but there's also days that it's quite thankless. And people will rightfully say, well, you chose that path, and on the good days you're making the money, so you got to take the rough days, and you do, you take them. But there are some times that you do get things, especially in a smaller business. I've had ex-employees abuse me, verbally on social media, call out my addictions, call out some of my frailties in the past, and they're human, and I don't hold it against them, right? They're that's their own stuff, right? So when you have the privilege to run and own a business, you're taking as many livelihoods as you employ, multiplied by at least 2 and possibly even 4 if they have wives, children, husbands, etc. So I currently employ just short of 50 people, so that could be anywhere between 120 and 200 people's lives and livelihoods that are dependent on our actions and activities. So the very best we can do is do that the best way we can. By the way, would I have some employees that are disgruntled that maybe I didn't treat them as well? Their opinion, possibly, quite possibly, and highly likely, and I think I know of a few. But like any walk of life, have any of us around this table, out of the 3 of us, upset somebody when we didn't mean to, or maybe someone who doesn't like who we are or what we become? That's their opinion, right? And that's theirs, not ours. And as I said earlier, other people think of us as none of our business. But if you can genuinely put your hand in your heart and say you do your best every day, and one of those things, so going back to what you had, the question that was asked, I have core values in life, and I bring those core values into my business. And people, partnership, continuous evolution, you know, are three of the core ones, right? And we brought in fun last year, you know, social responsibility is another, and sustainability is the last. And actually, if you take those values and you forget about construction or technology, you could probably put those same values in the wall in Hinamapa,
Yeah.
right? You know, continuous evolution, you know, people, partnerships, you know,
Very universal.
exactly. And make of them what you want. So I really wanted us to live them, you know, and live those values. And not everybody wants to, and for me, they kind of need to figure out whether they want to live the values, and if not, that's okay. There's, you know, there's no one handcuffing them to the door, and they can move on. For the people that do, and their families, I want to make sure that we support them as best we can, you know. And, you know, like some of the things you're talking about, Brian, I would imagine is some of the stuff we've talked about where, you know, we have, you know, 10-12% of our staff are currently trained as mental health first aiders, and it's a confidential service. They don't have to go to, you know, the CEO or somebody else or worry, oh, if I go to HR, you know, are they going to bring this up in my next review? No, you know, and all they're doing is trying to, and they're trained, you know, to be a pathway to places like this, or pathway to money supports or whatever it might be. And you know, we do other things. We put on events, we put on different species, and we give them volunteer days. We give them World Mental Health Day off every year. And I'm not looking for a hero's badge for any of that, by the way, because I think we benefit hugely by giving those things to people that value it. So when you do anything in life, when you run a business, not everyone's going to be your customer, and not everybody's going to be your employee. But what you're trying to do is attract the ones that value what you value. And really that's it. So if we can do those type of things, then we get the type of person that we believe, you know, follows the guidance and the values, right? So if someone walks up to this door and you know they've absolutely no intention of getting this program, because of the type of program it is, it'll still give them the opportunity, right? You're going to open the door anyway, right? So I talked about this earlier. Someone could be in prison and they might actually end up in a program like this just to get out of prison. I've known people like that, and I've assessed people like that. And I've seen people like that, surprise, surprise, they go back out and they end up back in prison or back on drugs again. But sometimes people get it kind of, I wouldn't say accidentally, but they're kind of like, oh, I'm here now, I might as well do the work. And surprise, surprise, they find out that there is another path, and it was worth taking.
Yeah.
You know?
Very true.
I love that you support mental health first aid with your staff. One of the things here at Hinamauka that we are all about is treating the whole client. I know that's a term that's been around since, what, the 70s?
Yeah.
Treating the whole client. That's not a new concept, but not everybody does it. Not everybody funds it, and not everybody does it. And that's something that we're really struggling here to bring about throughout the entire state of Hawaii, is trying to make sure that we're not just focused on your addiction to meth. We're not just focused on your addiction to alcohol. We're also here about your anxiety that's fueling your addiction to alcohol. We are trying to change the tide in all of Hawaii to say, this is a single person. Let's treat everything that's going on with that person. And that's a new model basically for Hawaii. But it is where we are focusing our attention because we truly believe that's how we should be treating
Well,
people.
our consumers kind of walking the door, it would be almost really difficult to avoid, okay, I'm just going to take care of this, and you can take the 9 other things back out when you leave,
Yeah.
and then you find them back in for the very same thing you treated them for because of the 9 things you didn't
Yeah.
treat. So, yeah.
It's so important that we don't get in the habit of sending people out in the same shape that they came into our doors. We have to help somebody find a way to make some improvements in their life.
And I think that's really, you know, it's so important, that holistic nature, isn't it? You know, I had a burnout just over 3 years ago, and it manifested. Its appearance was I was lying in the bed in Monaco after spending a week drinking, but having had months of anxiety attacks that I didn't realise they were. I was lying in the bed and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't catch a breath, and I had pains in my chest. you know, and the pains in my chest is not doing it any justice. You know, I felt like my heart was literally going to come out of my chest. And it took me about 5 hours to get out of bed. A friend of mine is in the industry, she's a meditation teacher, and she's done a lot of work with me on breathwork since, in meditation, and she helped me get as far as the plane. I got to the plane, I got home, and then it was a Friday evening of a bank holiday, public holiday weekend, right? So the equivalent of like last weekend, right? And instead of having the Friday closure, we would have the Monday closure. And I'm fortunate enough, because of the work I do, the job I have medical insurance. So I called my medical insurers, and they were like, yeah, okay, and we'll assess you on the phone. They assessed me on the phone, and I was like, yeah, we're concerned about your heart. And I had a good feeling. I knew that I had done damage to myself mentally, but I wasn't sure if I had actually damaged myself physically as well, and so if this was real, right? So I went in, made the phone call, and they did an assessment. They said, yeah, they told me the hospital to go to, and it was a particular private cardiac A&E unit in Dublin. And I went there, and they did multiple checks on me after about 2 or 3 hours. And bear in mind, I'm sitting there, I can't speak to them, right? I literally can't speak. And when I'm at half an hour in the company of somebody, I eventually managed to maybe get a word or two in. My ex is sitting there, and she's talking to them on my behalf. And then after I get comfortable, let's say you're in the room with me, and then you leave and you come in, then I'm another half an hour getting comfortable enough to be able to say 1 or 2 words to you. Anyway, they did all the tests, realised no, it's not a heart problem. And then they're like, okay, you fly a lot. Some of the symptoms of heart attack are very similar to the symptoms of a blood clot in your lungs. So they did multiple tests on me and that. So about 7-8 hours later, we're finishing up, and I was able to say to them, I was pretty sure, I think it's in the mental health. Can you give me anything? No, we can't. We're a heart unit. We can't give you anything. And my option then was white knuckle the weekend, or, and this is Saturday morning now, right? White knuckle the weekend till Tuesday to go to my GP, general practitioner, general doctor, or go to the psychiatric hospital and check myself in. Now, you guys know my story, and I made the wrong decision that day, and I did not go to the psychiatric hospital because my ego wouldn't allow me. Because I was like, no, I'm not as bad as I was 15 years ago. No, I wasn't as bad as I was. I was probably worse because I compounded, right? But my ego wouldn't, I chose to allow my ego to win, and I wouldn't go. And I white knuckled through the weekend, and I got through the weekend. I got through the weekend with help of family and some short-term sleeping pills and antidepressants. And it got me till Tuesday. But it's a pity that not everybody has the same holistic view as a centre like this does. So if someone comes in here and they come in for addiction treatment and they start having a heart attack, I would surely hope that Brian's not going to say, oh, I'm really sorry, you don't actually have a neck problem, you just have a heart problem. So you only go out in the street there, you're in the way. Of course you're going to get an ambulance, of course you're going to get into the hospital. But I was literally just put back in the street, and that's, I don't blame that hospital, I don't blame, that. So there needs to be a much more holistic approach to problems and complexities, and that's what I believe you truly get when you say, we meet the person where they're at and we bring in the whole person, no matter what's going on for them. So important.
Yes, we've been challenged in the last several years to, we live on sort of call the complex model, and that's what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. Complex is cases coming with multiple issues, and you said it best, you and Brian said it best, you just can't treat one part of that. Mm-hmm. You have to be ready and available and have the resources. If you're not capable, you're going to have the resources that can do them. And that's an art almost. Yeah. It's pretty much an art to be able to know all the resources in your community, because what you know this week may change next week in terms of what's available, right? Well,
and that
stuff we're dealing with today.
And that stuff doesn't come for free, right? So it needs funding, it needs support, and I think that's, and that's the piece, and, I think it's really important that if we as individuals, if we as businesses believe in it and have had definitely the support, or our family have had support from services like this, then we should definitely understand the requirement for them, but also the lack of funding that is there. Yeah. And not everybody is as fortunate as me that's in a position to be able to lean in on my network, to lean in on my community. But if you can, and you have, I would urge people to, and that might be that they see a lot of people they've been touched by cancer, so they pump a lot of their time and effort in. And hey, great too, I'm not saying what I mean, but it's these organisations, these services, they need public support, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise we won't continue to have them, and then unfortunately the crude facts are more people will die.
Yeah, exactly. The numbers will continue to grow.
Yeah, and that's actually where we are,
Right.
honestly, right now, is the medical model, the complex patient model, is not funded by insurance companies. In reality, it's not funded by the government. The only reason we can afford to do that is because we spend so much time fundraising to afford to be able to treat people the way that we know they need to be treated. So without that support from networks, without that support from people that have more resources, we couldn't continue to do that work. So we're eternally grateful to people that do choose to support us either financially or through their networks, just as you have, Carl. I mean, we cannot do it alone. So it's so important.
Yeah, I truly
so
appreciate the understanding the organization has and you have in terms of the not just the importance of it, but the impact it makes. You know what I mean? So having more organizations having that type of understanding, organizations like non-profit organizations that are trying to help with mental wellness would be definitely a plus.
It is. And we're in a position now where, 20 years ago, it was not okay to say, I have a problem. Whether it was substance abuse or whether it was anxiety or whether it was depression, didn't matter. It wasn't something that you could talk about. Today, it is. Today, it's okay. Today, you can still be accepted. You may catch some guff from time to time. It may be ourselves, like you just mentioned, Kahal. You couldn't allow yourself at that time to check yourself into a psychiatric hospital, even though you thought that might be best for you. So we may have some self-created barriers as well, but a lot of the public component, that we still have stigma, don't get me wrong. We still have a lot of stigma out in the community, but it's not like it was decades ago. And for that, I have to say I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful that it's okay now to bring up topics that maybe weren't okay to talk about in the past.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's part of the continuous evolution piece, right? But just because we are where we are, we don't stop here. We got to continue.
Can't.
I'm in a sector, the technology sector, that we are quite misunderstood at times too, right? We can't assume people know what we're doing. We've got to tell them what we're doing.
Yeah.
We've got to tell them why we're doing it, and as much as we can, how we're doing it. And we've got to include them and involve them. Because if we don't, then they'll either go one way or the other, really back it, or they'll really go against it. Oh no, you're housing these people and blah blah blah. And they shouldn't be there. They should be in prison. Whatever, blah blah blah. And it's all opinion based. But the only worst thing than no information is part information.
Yeah.
So people only have a little part of the story, right? And I think, there's nothing quite, excuse the pun, there's nothing quite as sobering as mental wellness issues hitting your own family. Especially if a friend group, and especially if it gets to the point of death by, drugs, suicide, etc. And that'll definitely sober the mind and focus the mind. But we talked, one of the first conversations Brian and I had when we were talking about funding and the ability of the funding to do work, was looking at the preventative care. Because imagine if we can prevent, yes, it's great to save lives, but lives that have already possibly been highly destructed through their own and other people's actions. But imagine we can actually intervene before that happens. Imagine how different the place would be.
Yeah, prevention is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think of the not only the lives that are saved, but the negative components of that person's lives. It's amazing how if you stop the cycle early, it's less expensive, makes good business. You know, it's good finances, but you also impact so many more people. And you're never going to know about that. That's the other thing. You don't know what you have saved somebody from necessarily. We know how many people have come through the doors. We know how many people have stayed sober for 6 months after they've been through the doors. We get that kind of data. But the people that we've helped through our prevention services, our teen care program, the prevention services that they do, we'll never be able to quantify that, but that doesn't change how important it is.
Yeah, I think that, you know, recovery has a voice today. You know, once upon a time, I think even part of the, you know, 12-step model and anonymity, everyone kind of was more reserved about recovery, but today recovery is being, you know, people are talking about these things, and through that comes strength, right? It gains momentum. So, you know, the more we talk about recovery, the more we talk about our illnesses and recovery, the more people will know. The more exposure, the more hopefully the objective is to improve understanding of the importance of this work, and not only the work, but the truth of the matter is not everyone gets it. You know, I mean, there's fatalities, right? There's statistics. People die from these. You know, so the more people know that, hey, there's help out there first and foremost. Not only even the helper needs help, like organizations like us, we need to continue the funding and things of that nature. So
the normalization that happens when we simply have a conversation, which is why I'm so eternally grateful to Carl, because he talks about it.
right.
That's the first step.
Well, recovery has a voice, but it needs to become louder, and that's what it is. It needs a renaissance throughout our whole society to make a bigger impact.
That's what normalizes it,
Right.
And that's what means that the next person is going to be, because of the strength that Carl has, the vulnerability that he shows. That's what's going to allow somebody else to share their story, and that's what it's all about.
I think the pieces that we're talking about is, you know, I'm a 14-year-old daughter. A lot of people say, you know, oh well, the younger generation are much more in touch with their emotions. They're much better at talking about mental well-being, mental health, and they are, by the way. And they're also much more, you know, they're challenging that drink culture, especially in, I know for an Irish perspective, you know, the younger people, the 16 to 21-year-olds, they're not, you know, come around someone and find another drug to choice. Yeah, there's phones, there's computers, but they're challenging it. But, you know, that didn't happen by accident. That's happened because little bits have been passed down generation by generation. And the work that's been done in places like this and in communities, you know, it couldn't have just happened. It wasn't that, you know, my generation was terrible about talking and my dad's generation was even worse. So we just decided as young kids, no, we're going to be better because they're crap at talking. No, because there was something there that was handed down. Something, even if it was only a nugget. And then that's something, you know, the Rolling Stone gathers much moss, right? You know, and now the snowball is getting bigger and bigger, and hopefully, you know, it will continue. But there are other problems, and now, you know, I remember when I went into treatment 18 years ago, so gambling addiction wasn't fully recognised in Ireland, but I was in treatment with somebody that was in with a spending addiction, right? And that poor man was laughed at by everybody else in the centre. Sure, we all addicted to spending money. Do you know what I mean? If I haven't, I'll spend it. But you know, yes, you can be, but it's compulsive. Like OCD, you'll hear people joke all the time. Oh yeah, I have to line the glasses up at home because I have OCD. I've worked with someone that has clinical OCD. It's a real thing, right? And it's as debilitating, if not more, than, you know, ADHD, autism, anything else, if you don't get control and hold of it. But how many people actually know about it? You know what I mean? So, and the same for addiction. So I think the more that we can elaborate, the more that we can really truly show people, and like, you know, I said it in the room today, right? And I have no problem saying it here. You know, I did things that 18, 20 years ago I should have got locked up for. I should have gone to prison. They were bad enough things to go to prison, right? And I didn't, because somebody spared me. Someone gave me an opportunity. So who the hell am I not to try and help some other people? You know, like I got You know,
Pay it forward.
yeah, they absolutely pay it forward, right? And you know, and I hope that I'm testament that when someone does get a chance, they can actually turn their lives around, right? And even when I messed up, like the second time, you know, when I got back in active conditioning, I didn't do as much commercial damage to anybody else. I did a lot to myself and a lot to my family, emotional and commercial. But because things had moved, you know, where I moved on in life, but you know, but I still did a lot of damage in the second time around. But you know, so we gotta, you know, people need that chance. But look at what they can do if they get that chance, you know, and get that support. And imagine, you know, I mentioned earlier a man named Pat Farrell. If he hadn't have given me that chance, and he had said, you know what, yeah, that young man deserves to learn a lesson, and the only place for him to learn that lesson is prison. Would I be alive today? If I was, would I be lying on the street with a needle in my arm, or you know, or whatever? You know, living under a bridge. Highly likely, in my opinion. You know, if I was alive, I doubt I would have made it to 45. Honestly, and I'm not saying that for dramatic effect. You know, the statistics will tell you. You know, you go in the gates of that prison for the first crime, or the first one you're caught for. You were telling me this earlier, right? It's probably not the first crime you committed, it's just the first one you're caught for. Then, you know, your chances of survival deteriorate hugely. The percentage, back to the gambling, the odds become weaker and weaker and weaker for survival, you know. So, yeah.
Where are we at the moment? What do we want to do? What do we want to say to anything you wanted to share with Cathal before we move to closing off our session here?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to truly express our appreciation. As I said earlier, you know, the donation was amazing, but even more important than money is your willingness to speak to our clients, your willingness to speak to our staff, your willingness to support Hina Malka through our, you know, give us the support we need so that we can keep doing the work that we're doing. Your willingness to be vulnerable, and that's so hard. Especially in business, in a male-dominated, hyper-masculine environment, it is so hard to be vulnerable, but it is so eternally important, and your willingness to do that leaves me in awe, and I just wanted to say mahalo. Mahalo nui loa from the bottom of my heart, Cathal, for your willingness. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot, but you know, equally I get as much out of doing it. You know, I really do. You know, and I said to you earlier with your staff that, you know, this isn't a, you know, a thank you and goodbye from each other to say that was cool, you know, best of luck in the future. It was this is the start of a partnership, you know, and you know, I said, you know, partnership is one of our core values, you know, and you know, I want us to continue to make a difference, and as long as I'm the CEO of Moy, you know, and in a senior role in Moy, we will continue to make a difference with you guys, and as long as I'm in this sector, I'll do everything I can to get them to, and wherever I end up, if there is a somewhere else, and if there's not, then I'll continue doing it here, but I'll continue to do everything in my power to support, because I see the value and the difference that you're making, and I'll close on this. You know, I'm not coming to this island that long. I don't live here. Right? I've been coming here for 4 or 5 years, and when I tell people who are my local friends or friends who are, you know, who have moved to the island, but anywhere between 5 and 35 years ago, almost all of them, most of them, I would say 70% of them know exactly who you guys are, you know, and that's the impact you have in the community, right? And for the ones that didn't, They do, because I told them. And I'll keep doing that, right? I'm not bad at spreading the word, and I'll keep doing that. And let's keep, and it's not just about this centre, and that's a wonderful thing, right? I had this conversation with Angela Hayes, who runs a charity in Ireland, the Suicide Prevention, Thomas Hayes Foundation, shameless plug, Angela. You know, how happy do you think that woman would be if she had to close her doors because everybody stopped taking their own life?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's likely not going to happen, right? But imagine that, you know, it's not like she's going to be, oh, damn, I went out of business. She was successful. You know what I mean? So let's, you know, let's spread the word. Let's support other similar agencies to yours in different countries, in different places. And no different to industry. I don't know how much of it happens in your sector, but no different industry. I'm a great believer in our ecosystem, in our industry. So if I can even help expose you, and I've already exposed Brian to Angela, to each other, to charities that I work with, you can learn from each other. And you can become better, you know, by just learning from each other. Because that's what happens in the rooms, right? When we get well, when we get recovery, when we get an opportunity to get well, it's the lessons of other people that we learn from. And again, a bigger tool bag, right? You know, and adding more. So if you guys, if one of the things I can do is help connect you guys to our industry, and hopefully we can continue to raise some money. But if I can connect you then to, you know, I just did some work in France with a charity, and I won't even try and say the French pronunciation of it, but it's called A Voice for Her. So it's a charity where it basically supports women and young children who need refuge from violent domestic relationships. You know, and suddenly, if we can break, like, technology is breaking down borders, right? And I'm involved with the tech sector. We're doing a podcast right now, right? It's going to go out live, you know, out across the world if people are willing to, and we'll use other social medias to try and push it out there. But if we can shorten the gap between nations, time zones, and countries, and get people communicating and working together on a kind of a holistic, collective, globalized approach, then it becomes much bigger than Hinamauku, Hawaii, Carl Quinn, Brian, Bill. You know what I mean? It's you know, and it takes a village. You know.
I always took on the idea or the philosophy over the years that, you know, that my recovery is much bigger than myself. My effort is much bigger than myself. It's not just about myself anymore. Once upon a time, maybe when I had to get better, but you move into this position that, quite frankly, you have some authority in terms of, if we're speaking, coming out of the ruts of life, or coming from the gutter, from the streets, and then turning your life around, and then now you're in an instrumental place to make a difference, like you're saying. It's a powerful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, it is a beautiful thing. I agree.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I do want to thank you so much. I mean, as Brian pretty much did what Brian said. I truly appreciate your contributions, and, you know, I'm glad that, you know, Brian connected with you, and here we are. As a result, here we are today, coming speaking with the clients. It's always, you know, I don't know, sometimes I can't put it in words. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Brian, for being on our podcast. I do want to tell our listeners, for more information on how you can get help with supporting the important work we do here at Hinamauka, you can visit our website at hinamauka.org. That is HINAMAUKA.org. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much again, and that would have a great day. Aloha.
Thank you very much.